Jump into it. So hi everyone, I am Charlotte. I am one of the licensed advisors at New Zealand Shores, and today I am joined by my colleague Frederick, who is also one of our licensed advisors, and we're both based in our Hamilton office. So if anyone knows anything about New Zealand, we are roughly about an hour south of Auckland in the North Island, so smack bang in the middle. Don't live by a coast, unfortunately, but we have them on either side of us, so we're very lucky in that respect. So today our session is largely going to be about what New Zealand is like, what benefits you would have once you move to New Zealand, and what the visa process will look like. So if you just bear with me a second, I'll just jump into sharing my screen. Cool, there we go. So yeah, as I mentioned, we're from New Zealand Shores. We think New Zealand is a wonderful destination to live, amazing place to relocate to, and as an immigration consultancy, we can help make that dream a reality. So a little bit about us. So we do offer Australian visas as well through our sister company called Australian Shores. We are all run in the same office space, but we do operate as two separate businesses just because we do operate as two companies offering visa advice for two different countries. But we will focus on New Zealand largely today. If you are interested in Australia though, please do reach out separately, and we can either guide you through just what that process looks like for Australia, or if you are potentially interested in both countries, we can have you connected with an advisor who is licensed for both Australia and New Zealand, and they can guide you through those processes simultaneously. So in New Zealand, it is a requirement of the New Zealand government to be licensed in order to provide immigration advice. And in New Zealand, we are licensed by the Immigration Advisors Authority. So it's just really important to note that if you are communicating with someone who says they are able to give you immigration advice in New Zealand, that you do check in on that. So there is a tool on the Immigration Advisors website that you can go and search up the person's name just to double check that they are licensed. And under that, we have to adhere to a code of conduct. So we have to basically make sure we're giving a really good service to you. So we're all really proud of the fact that everyone in the company is licensed. We've got 12 licensed advisors and a very small support team. So you do work one-on-one with a licensed advisor, which is really important. You're not being funneled through our admin team before being able to connect with the person you need to. We were founded in 2009, and a number of our staff have experience on both sides of the job. And what that means is that a lot of our advisors have actually previously worked for Immigration New Zealand in the past. So we get that insider knowledge about how their processing works. And that's actually helped grow our knowledge in how to effectively process visas. Out of our 12 advisors, only 3 of us were actually born in New Zealand. The rest have all migrated at some point in their lives. So Sarah and Alan, who started New Zealand Shores, are 2 of our New Zealand-born citizens, and then myself is the other New Zealand-born citizen. Pretty much all of our team have got citizenship subsequently after migrating, so they know what that whole process looks like from start to finish, and they understand all the stress that goes along with it. So a little bit about what we'll cover today. I'll go over a few factors about life in New Zealand. Fred will cover off New Zealand visas, and we'll talk a little bit about securing employment as well. If you have got some questions, you can drop them down into the chat. We won't be able to answer everything, but we will try and cover off as many as we can. But otherwise, if there are questions we don't cover, you can get in touch with us afterwards. We'd be more than happy to discuss anything in detail. So a few basic facts about New Zealand. If you look at that picture on the left-hand side there, the green bits are basically where no one lives effectively. So you'll be able to see that everyone in New Zealand is largely focused around those coasts, and we have a bigger population in the North Island than we do in the South. But our clients end up right from Cape Reinga, which is the very tip of the North Island, all the way down to Bluff, which is the bottom of the South Island. So we see people migrating right throughout New Zealand. Don't think that just because most of the population is in the North Island that that's where you'll end up. You could literally end up anywhere in that big broad map. So keep an open mind when you are looking for job opportunities in New Zealand and places to settle. Few fun facts about New Zealand. You've probably all seen a lot of photos of green paddocks with sheep in them. Well, we have 1.5 sheep to every person in New Zealand. It has been one of our biggest export industries, sheep products and lamb, wool, etc. So we're still very much in that space where we're heavily primary industry focused. You will never be further than 128 k's from the beach. So as I mentioned, we are in Hamilton, which is kind of right in the middle of that North Island. So we are effectively landlocked, but we have, even though we are landlocked, we've got one beach on the west coast, which is about a 45-minute drive away, which has some of the best surf breaks in the country. And then we've also got Mount Maunganui on the other coast on the east, which is roughly just over an hour away. So even though we are landlocked, and lots of people love to laugh about landlocked cities in New Zealand, we're actually really close. So it's not a far drive at all to get close to the beach. We're also the first country in the world to see the sunrise. So there are actually a lot of people that travel down to New Zealand to be here for the new year. And it was a huge thing during the turn of the millennium. People wanted to be, some of the first to see the turn of the new year or the turn of the new millennium. So if you're wanting to be some of the first people in the world to see that sunrise, then this is the place to be. We're also the least corrupt nation in the world, so we have a huge amount of transparency across our government. There's always facts published about government spending and, politicians' benefits and all that kind of stuff. So that's regularly reported on. So it's very hard to hide anything down here in New Zealand, but it's something we are really proud of because we are an open and honest and trustworthy country in that space. Our unemployment rate typically does sit around 4.6 it is edging a little bit closer to 5% at the moment, but it is always very low. And what that means as a migrant is that you are actually, you're in demand. So New Zealand needs you. We have a small population and we need skilled people to come into New Zealand to help bolster our workforce. The reality is that those, 4.5 to 5% people who are unemployed, a lot of them actually don't necessarily want to work. So we have a really great social welfare system down here, which means that if you choose to not be employed, you can actually get paid by the government. So often, though, when we talk about unemployment rates in New Zealand, those people aren't actually out actively looking for jobs, because if they were skilled, they would have already been snapped up by employers. So even though unemployment's kind of fluctuating a little bit at the moment, it still does mean there's good job opportunities down here in New Zealand for you. We need migrants. We are a country built on migration, and that hasn't changed even now. We still really need people to come in and help fill those shortages. Another fact I love to laugh about is we are free of animals that want to kill you. So as a Kiwi who loves hiking and running and getting out in nature, it's never lost on me that I can kind of wander off into the bush and there isn't going to be anything nasty above me, in front of me, underneath me that's going to come and bite me and kill me. So if you love getting into the outdoors, but you're sometimes worried about snakes or spiders or bears or whatever it might be, we have none of that down here. We do have one small spider that if it bites you, it gets a little bit itchy, and that's kind of all Kiwis tend to freak out about. So yeah, very safe and out in nature as well, which is awesome. We are a very diverse country. So we were the last country in the world to be colonized back in the 1800s. The Treaty of Waitangi was signed in 1840, and that is our founding document. So in the scheme of the history of the world, we are very fresh. And what that means is we have had a country basically built on migration. So we had a massive cohort of people coming from the UK and Europe sort of in the 1800s, early 1900s, but that has drastically changed in the last sort of 150 years, where we've really grown in the number of people who are migrating to New Zealand. So much like our own workforce here at New Zealand Shores, where most of us were born overseas, that's what you'll find in a lot of workplaces in New Zealand. So as an expat or a migrant, you'll have a lot of friends from different parts of the world, and we think that makes New Zealand pretty special. A big thing when you're migrating to New Zealand is that you get free healthcare. So anyone who arrives into New Zealand on a visa which is valid for 2 years or longer, which is the vast majority of people, most people get 5-year work visas and then are able to apply for residence. Are entitled to access our healthcare system for free. So what that means is if you need to go to the hospital or you have to go to your doctor, you do have to pay a copay for it, but it's generally about 20 New Zealand dollars to see a GP. Anything at the hospital is completely free. So that's a really big draw card, and that's something that is also can be a big saving. So you're not having to spend a lot of money on holding insurance. You can if you want to, and a lot of my American clients will kind of keep holding insurance because that's what they used to, but you actually don't have to. If you get sick or injured and need that hospital treatment, you will just walk into the hospital or catch an ambulance and you'll be taken care of at no charge. So you're not having to worry about picking the hospital that your insurance will approve or anything like that. So that's a massive benefit to migrating. We also have what we call Accident Compensation Corporation, or ACC for short. What ACC is it means if you are at work or if you're out hiking or mountain biking or running or whatever it may be, or doing some DIY at home and you hurt yourself through an accident, pretty much your treatment is covered. So if you need specialist physios or osteos or there's a whole chiropractors, a whole raft of things under there you can claim, which are heavily subsidized by the government, if not free. And if you have to take time off work to recover, the New Zealand government will actually pay 80% of your wage until you're able to return to work. So you're really, really well looked after by our healthcare system down here. In terms of schooling, just like everywhere else in the world, we have public and private education. Private schools, no matter who you are in New Zealand, you pay. So that's, again, standard across everywhere else. However, when you come into New Zealand on either a work visa or a residency visa, if you have children traveling with you, they have domestic student rights. So what that means is they are able to attend school effectively for free in the public space. You do pay a school donation, but it's roughly between $100 to $200 per child per year. So effectively it is free. The donation is just there to help buffer the school's bank accounts and make sure that they can offer really good services to you. So if you can pay it, it is encouraged, but it is a donation, so you don't have to. Everyone in New Zealand does pay for early childhood education though, so if you want your child to go to kindergarten or an early childhood education centre, everyone does pay. But once your child is 3, the government does actually subsidise roughly about 50% of that. So you will actually get that benefit on a work visa as well as residency. I'll now hand over to Frederick. So Frederick's going to talk through all the different visa types. Fred, if I'm not hitting the next button as quickly as you'd like me to, just let me know.
Will do. Awesome. Thank you so much, Charlotte, for the wonderful um,
Oh, sorry, I've
introduction.
gone so far.
No worries. Yeah, wonderful introduction and brief indication of what New Zealand has to offer. So, just a little bit about myself. As Charlotte mentioned, like myself, I'm a migrant and I wasn't born in New Zealand. I was born in the Philippines and migrated at an early age. So, I've got a pretty good idea of what it's like to be moved as a young child into another country and assimilate and settle. And I must admit, living in New Zealand, it's been a fantastic opportunity for not only myself but my family and my future family moving forward. There's plenty of opportunities. It's safe. It's got everything that we would want to need. And in terms of peace and education and diversity, nature, of course. So it's brilliant. It's a great place to grow up in. Now, my portion of the slides will be a little bit more boring because talking about details in terms of visas. So please bear with me for this portion of the show. But moving forward, I'll be talking about visa options in New Zealand. So in the first instance, temporary visas and then resident visas, and then potentially the opportunity to study in New Zealand as well. Now, in the first instance, I'd just like to give an indication of the temporary visas that could be available to you as a migrant looking to move to New Zealand. So the first one is called an accredited employer work visa, So the key thing here, it's based on a job offer. So you will require a job offer from a New Zealand employer before you can apply for this visa. Secondly, we have family visas, and this is typically for people who do hold work visas already in New Zealand who have a job offer. Typically, they can bring along their partners. So that's partners includes wife, people that you are living with in a genuine and stable relationship. You don't necessarily have to be married or engaged or have any formal status. What Immigration New Zealand looks at is whether you and your partner have been living together in a genuine and stable relationship for a period of time. So that's quite wide open, and it's a open interpretation from that perspective. So that's great. And you can also bring your dependent children as well to be able to study, visit New Zealand while you are here working. Thirdly, we've got student visas. Obviously, education from the United States is also world class in itself, but you can also potentially look to upskill yourself if you're already, let's say, somebody who holds a bachelor degree or a master's degree. You can take the next step further in New Zealand and also receive world class education. And we'll talk a little bit more about these topics later on. Um, a fourth option will be through partnership. So partnership in terms of a relationship with a New Zealand citizen. So if you're potentially an American citizen and you happen to be in a relationship with a New Zealander, that is also a potential pathway for you, as long as you can prove again that living together aspect in a genuine and stable relationship. Another option is general visitor visas. So as the name suggests, it is a visit visa and it's typically up to a certain duration. And not necessarily on the slide, but I did want to point out that as an American citizen, you do have the ability to travel to New Zealand without needing to apply for a visa in the first instance. So it's called a visa waiver. Visit a visa as an American citizen, as a holder of an American passport, you have the right to travel to, or the opportunity to travel to New Zealand for a 3 month period without needing to apply for a visa, but you will need to apply for what's called an NZETA, similar to what you have in place in the United States, whereby, like for somebody like myself, I'm a New Zealand citizen, I can travel to the United States for 90 days, without applying for a visa, but I would need to apply for an ESTA. So something like an ESTA, you would need to apply for here in New Zealand as well to come. And then there's also grandparent visitor visas. So uh, parent or grandparents of New Zealand citizens or residents can apply to visit their family here in New Zealand. And again, not on this list, but potentially as an option for any of you who are aged between 18 to 30. We also have what's called the USA Working Holiday Visa. And this visa allows you to come to New Zealand for up to 12 months and work all throughout that period and also holiday and visit. So it's a really good option if you are, within that age bracket, 18 to 30 years old. But certainly, if any of these visa categories are of interest to you and you want to explore it further, please do feel free to reach out to any of us and we can look at your migration prospects and opportunities.
Oh,
Awesome. Can we move on to the next slide, please?
yes, sorry, technical issues on my part. Here we
No
go.
worries. All right. So moving back to the first option that you saw in the previous slide, the accredited employer work visa, that process is sort of split into three steps. So covering them briefly, the first step to get an accredited employer work visa is in the name in itself. You would need the support or a job offer from an accredited employer. So what that essentially means is that that employer that is based in New Zealand has already been checked by Immigration New Zealand, that they are, a genuine business and they are viable and that they can support migrants to come to New Zealand. So that's the first stage of the process is for an employer in New Zealand to obtain accreditation status with Immigration New Zealand. Now, the second step is called an employer job check. And what that involves typically is proving to Immigration New Zealand that the role that they are seeking to hire you for has no local candidates who can fill that role, meaning no New Zealanders who can fill that role. But typically, they can sort of bypass that process of proving the need that there isn't any local candidates if the role is already, for example, on the green list. So a green list, well, we'll talk about later, but certain roles in that list, for example, teachers, doctors, nurses, are in demand in New Zealand. As Charlotte mentioned, we have a lot of occupations in New Zealand that we are looking for skilled people for and needing to fill those roles. So there are a big list in terms of roles that can bypass that job check process in terms of proving that there are no local candidates to do the role. But the employer still has to submit a job check, but it's typically a much more quicker process. Now, once that second step is completed, at that point in time, the employer can issue you a job token and you can apply for the accredited employer work visa. So that stage is a three-step process. Now, for an accredited employer work visa, typically you can get up to a 5-year work visa, which is fantastic. Gives you plenty of time to either work here on a temporary basis if that's what you're looking for, or potentially give you time to meet the requirements for residency and give you enough time to settle in the country. So typically, an accredited employer work visa will have conditions. And that those three conditions include specifying the employer that you can work for, and the location, and also the role. But that doesn't necessarily mean that once you get to New Zealand, you'll be subject to only working in those particular conditions. You do have the ability to vary those conditions if you were to obtain, a new employment opportunity in a different location or a different role. So there are possibilities to change those conditions. So certainly when you're initially looking for jobs here in New Zealand, like Charlotte said, you wouldn't necessarily want to limit yourself to a particular location or particular role or a particular employer, because once you get here, it will be much more easier to move around once you already get the work visa. And apart from those three conditions, to be able to get a work visa, typically you would need to be earning $29.66 per hour or above. And typically, if you are a skilled person looking to work in a skilled role, you shouldn't have any issue meeting those requirements. And there are some salary exemptions based on role type. Again, going back to that list of roles that are in demand in New Zealand, there are certain exemptions that will make it easier for you to get visas. And again, you can bring your partner and you can bring your dependent children while on a temporary work visa for the same duration as your own visa, which is great. And the partner will be able to get work rights in addition to yourself. And the partner will be able to work openly for any employer, any job in any location in New Zealand. So that's a huge benefit for those who are looking to bring in family members at the same time. And although the duration is up to 5 years, some visas, depending on your role type, can be a shorter duration, but typically most of the visas approved under this category would be 5 years. Awesome. Now, I'd just like to cover some of the residence pathways that are potentially available for you to look into. So one of them, as I have been mentioning before, is the green list, tier 1 and tier 2 occupations. So tier 1 means that you can apply for residency straight away without needing a work visa or any other thing, as long as you have a job offer and you meet the requirements of that list. And then tier 2 is a work to residence pathway, meaning you need to work in New Zealand typically for 2 years before you can apply for residency. Now, we also have sector agreements pathway to residency. So the most common one I can think of at this point, it would be the care workforce sector. So when I say care workforce, these are people who are personal care assistants or caregivers, nursing assistants. So those people can, if they can get a job offer and start working in New Zealand for 2 years, they can qualify for residency as well. The third option is called the skilled migrant category. And again, this is also based on a job offer. So typically, if your job offer doesn't necessarily meet the requirements of the green list, the alternative pathway typically would be the skilled migrant category. And it's a points-based system based on your background, so qualifications, rate of pay, and then typically you would also need to work either 1 to 3 years in New Zealand to qualify for residency. but we'll dig into these categories and how they work in the next few slides. And then again, in terms of partnership with a New Zealander, this is also a pathway towards residency once you've been living together with your New Zealand partner for at least 12 months. Great. So in terms of the green list tier one residence category, as I mentioned, there's a number of roles and occupations on this list that could provide a pathway towards or a faster pathway towards residency. So these roles include IT professionals, medical professionals. So these are the nurses, doctors, pediatricians, or any other type of medical roles that require registration in New Zealand is typically fast track. We also have engineers, surveyors, and construction project managers, amongst others.
Oh, sorry. Here we go.
No worries. And for the tier two 2 year pathway, which requires you to work in New Zealand, this will include roles such as teachers, diesel mechanics, electricians, plumbers, and amongst others. And again, your partner will be able to work alongside if you were able to get a 2 year pathway towards residency on a temporary work visa. So in the green list, tier one, there's 151 occupations. So as you can imagine, that's a lot of roles that have the potential to be fast tracked towards residency in New Zealand. However, something you need to be mindful of is that we do have an age limit on our residence categories. So not only the green list tier one or tier two, but also the skilled migrant category. We have an age limit of 55 years or below. So something to keep in mind if that's something that could affect you either right now or in the near future. And again, each role has different requirements. So there may be different wage thresholds that you need to meet, and also potentially qualification requirements. And then, as I said, for example, the medical profession, you might require registration before you can meet the requirements under that list. Now, typically for English, American citizens who have uh, obviously hold a passport and have lived and worked in the country for at least 5 years or have undertaken some form of um, bachelor degree or master level qualifications in the United States are typically exempt from requiring to produce English language test results to demonstrate their capability. So that's great. And then the processing time frame for these applications typically range between 6 to 8 weeks. So it's really quick. And you don't need temporary visas. So essentially, once you meet the requirements and you make an application, and if you get approved residency within that time frame, you can enter New Zealand as a resident, which is fantastic. And essentially, once you get a resident visa, you will have full rights as if you're a New Zealander. So you can vote in New Zealand, you can access the retirement scheme, you can buy your own property in New Zealand, you have full access to healthcare and education as if you're a New Zealand citizen. So this is essentially the golden ticket if you can meet the requirements, and it's brilliant if you do. And we'll be able to make assessments based on your circumstances, whether or not you would be eligible for this list and this pathway to residency. Now, the tier two green list has less occupations, but still a decent amount. And again, similar to the tier one, there's the age limit of 55 or below. And again, different requirements depending on the role. However, as I mentioned earlier, through this pathway, you will need to come to New Zealand on a work visa and work for 2 years before you can meet the requirements. Now, the alternative skilled migrant category pathway is usually for those who do get a New Zealand job offer but don't necessarily meet the requirements of the green list, and that's absolutely fine. Might just take you a bit longer to get residency, but it still remains as a pathway to New Zealand. Again, the age limit, 55 years or younger. Now, as I mentioned earlier, it's a points-based system. So to qualify for residency under this category, you need to get a minimum of 6 points to qualify, and you get points based on your qualification background, your job offer, or current salary, and also if you have occupational registration for your role. And then typically you need to make up the remaining points with New Zealand work experience. So essentially you get 1 point for every year that you work in New Zealand. All right. And then, anyways, just to going back on the point system, just to give you an example so that you get an idea. So let's say somebody who holds a bachelor degree or a master level degree of qualification from the United States. So a bachelor degree would typically allow you to claim 3 points under that system, meaning to make up the remaining amounts of 3 points to get a total of six, you would need to work in New Zealand for 3 years. But let's say you have a master's degree or a PhD from the United States. If it's a master's, that's 5 points in that category, meaning you only need to work for 1 year. And then let's say you have a PhD from the United States, potentially you can claim a total of 6 points just by holding PhD, meaning you don't need to work in New Zealand, so you can apply for residencies through the skilled migrant category right away, provided you have a suitable job offer. So again, it's a really flexible residence category as well, and could work out for you if you don't meet the requirements of the green list. And then what I wanted to cover in this next slide would be the student pathway. So we Education New Zealand certified, so we represent most of the top universities, polytechnics, and private providers in New Zealand. So we act as agents on your behalf. And if you were considering this pathway in terms of upskilling yourself or getting a foot into the door in terms of, as I said, like if you were to complete a bachelor's degree or a master's degree, that would qualify for points under the skilled migrant category system, and potentially fast track your pathway towards residency through that category. This is a great option, and a lot of our clients also pivot towards this pathway for that very reason. And as I said, we do work with most of the top universities in New Zealand. And if you were considering this pathway, I recommend that you reach out to us before you engage with any of the universities, because we do help out with the full process all the way from the beginning in terms of the enrollment and engaging with universities and helping you with options that are available to you, all the way to the visa applications for yourself and your family. And we can offer the service free of charge as well if we were able to represent you with the university. So again, something to be mindful of, and we have fantastic relationships and fantastic outcomes with the students that we assist throughout this process. However, the one setback or consideration that you have to think about would be the fees involved with this process. I mean, you will be paying international fees, typically ranging from 30 to maybe 50,000 New Zealand dollars in the first instance. But again, with the exchange rate between the United States and New Zealand, that may not be such a huge issue. Um, and in terms of the benefit of undertaking studies, so let's say, for example, a master's qualification, you were to do that, you can get a post-study work visa for up to 3 years after completion of your qualification. So what a post-study work visa is essentially it's an open work visa allowing you to work for any employer in any location in New Zealand in any role. So it's similar to a partnership open work visa, and it's great because it provides you with a lot of flexibility in terms of your opportunities after your studies. And if you do choose to undertake studies in New Zealand, you can also bring partner and children, which is great. Your partner will be able to work in New Zealand while you are studying, and your children will be able to attend school while you are studying as well. And just on the slide is just a snapshot of the universities and providers that we work with throughout New Zealand. So a lot of the top providers in New Zealand we have agreements with, which is fantastic. And in terms of the case study, as I mentioned, for example, you're somebody who's you know not able to get a job offer just because of for whatever reason, and you wanted to still be able to migrate to New Zealand, for example. Potentially, you can undertake studies So if you already hold a bachelor degree, logically the next step for you would be a master's qualification in New Zealand. And upon completion of this qualification, you'll get 5 points in the skilled migrant category. And given you have a 3-year post-study work visa, you should have more than enough time to, secure the right employment to meet the requirements and work that 1 year to gain a total of 6 points in the skilled migrant category. Now, the last slide I wanted to go over was just the difference between the terms of residency, permanent residency, and citizenship, because you may see, a lot of these terms are being floated around, in social media or websites or anywhere else. Just wanted to clarify what the differences are between these three terms. So when you apply for residency through Green List or skilled migrant pathway, for example, upon approval of that application, you'll get a resident visa. So a resident visa has travel conditions for 2 years, and you need to meet presence or time spent in New Zealand requirements while on this visa. So to give you an idea of what that will be, you need to spend at least 6 months in every year for the next 2 years of the validity of that resident visa. But that doesn't mean that you won't have access to, as I mentioned before, rights as if you're a New Zealand citizen. You still do. You'll still be able to purchase property or vote or access healthcare in New Zealand as a resident. And then this next step after meeting those requirements is to apply for what's called permanent residency. So basically what that does is after that 2-year period, you would apply for a permanent resident visa to lift all of those conditions in terms of being able to travel in and out of New Zealand and needing to meet presence requirements. So once you step on a permanent resident visa, essentially what that means is you can travel in and out of New Zealand. So let's say you want to go back to the United States for 5 years, you want to live there for whatever reason, and you want to come back, your permanent resident visa will not expire in New Zealand. So it's indefinite. And then once you've held a resident visa or a permanent resident visa for a total of 5 years, so typically that would be 2 years on a resident visa and then 3 years on a permanent resident visa, you can apply for New Zealand citizenship if you wish. I understand the American passport is just as powerful, but hey, I mean, some people would like that black passport that we New Zealanders have, and it looks beautiful. So that's an option for you as well if you want to gain citizenship after 5 years.
Awesome. Thanks, Fred. That was really insightful into all our different visa categories. So I will just mention that all our advisors are well versed in every single visa category. We do have a couple certain specialties where people, we have a couple of advisors that just manage those particular applications, but we often get people who will come to us wanting to initially engage down the skilled migrant pathway. So you're migrating on the basis of a job offer, but you may then decide, well, actually that's taking too long and I want to switch to a student visa or whatever it might be. And you will be, guided through that process by the same advisor. So we are kind of nearing the end of our presentation, and there are some questions which I will answer live because we've only had about half a dozen come through. But just a little recap on New Zealand Shores. So we have done over 18,000 visas since we were established in 2009, and 6,500 of those visas were actually done in the last 3 years. So we are one of the top 6 consultancies in New Zealand based on visa volumes alone, and those stats actually come from Immigration New Zealand directly, so I promise we're not making them up. We have a 98% visa approval rating across all of those categories, and often that 2% roughly, we know they're going to be declined. So we don't go and actively submit visa applications which we know are going to have issues. If there is anything weird or wonderful or unique about your situation, we will discuss it in detail with you and try and map a pathway forward. And if we did feel like there was going to be any issues, we would let you know. So we wouldn't just go and submit a visa application, with the expectation that we'll wait and see what happens. As I mentioned, a number of our advisors have worked for Immigration New Zealand as well, and we feel like that makes our knowledge base pretty amazing because we've got that insider insight into how immigration work, and they're a government department, so they can be a bit of a nightmare to deal with sometimes. But what I think is most important about New Zealand Shores and our advisors is that probably about 60 to 70% of our job has now switched to, obviously not only do we deal with migrants, but we're also dealing with employer liaisons. So when you're applying for jobs and you're going through that process, there are still a number of employers out there who don't quite understand what that employer accreditation looks like. What is a job check? What is a job token? So a big portion of our jobs now is actually liaising with employers and guiding them through that process. Because even though we've had employer accreditation in its current form for just over 2.5 years now, it's still a little bit of a confusing topic for a lot of employers. So that's how we can help mitigate some of that catch-22 stuff. And I know there is a question, so I'll come back to that shortly. But we can help be your point of contact in New Zealand, and we can chat to employers about what that process looks like, and we can actually assist them if they would like us to. So we're across, you know, not only your process, but the employer process as well, which makes us a perfect choice to guide you through that process. The other point I will just talk on here briefly is that Facebook forums can be misleading. We are in a number of them, and I'm quite active in a number of American-based migration Facebook groups and communities. And to be honest, there is a lot of misinformation out there. So there's a couple Facebook groups that often before I get to answer a question, there's probably half a dozen incorrect questions. So do not trust your migration journey, you know, to Facebook. It's a scary world out there on social media, and there's so much misinformation floating around. So make sure any information you do get is either directly from Immigration New Zealand themselves, or from a trusted source such as a licensed immigration advisor or New Zealand lawyer. Next steps, if anyone's interested, we do offer an eligibility assessment, and we would be more than happy to offer free eligibility assessments to anyone who has attended this webinar. Please do just touch base. You would have been sent an email from us, so you can just reply to that requesting that eligibility assessment, and we can guide you through that process. We can do dual assessments for both New Zealand and Australia. I know we haven't covered Australian visas, but that is on the cards in the next week or so. So if you are interested in both countries, do just let us know, and we can get that particular assessment out to you. As part of that eligibility assessment, we do also offer personal consultations. So you'll get a special link to book in a meeting with one of our 12 advisors, and you can go over any questions in detail you have. And then, of course, if you're keen to get started, we would love to hear from you. We'd be really excited to help you through that process of migration. Cool. So I'll just pull up the questions. Sorry, everyone, just bear with me for a second. Technology is not my strong point. Right, Q&A. All right, so I might answer a few, Fred, and then I see there's been a few more pop through, so we might not get through everyone, but we will try and cover off as many as we can. So I might flick a few to you, Fred, and then I might answer a few as well. So the first one, we've got an anonymous attendee saying, I imagine with the recent US election, you're having a spike of interest in people looking to migrate to New Zealand. Yes, correct. Our inboxes have been absolutely inundated for the last couple of weeks, but we're seeing a lot of really cool candidates come through, which is neat. What job skills are you looking for, and what do you recommend for those of us that don't necessarily meet those niche jobs that are in high demand? I'll give that one to you, Fred.
All right. So in terms of, yeah, you're certainly right. In light of the recent US election, there has been a lot of interest with, Americans looking to look at opportunities elsewhere in terms of moving to Australia or New Zealand. There's certainly been plenty of news out there. And in terms of the jobs and skills that the country is looking for, as I mentioned in my portion of the slides, there are some roles that are on the green list, and if those skills are not, necessarily fitting your criteria, then potentially, in the first instance, depending on whether you meet the requirements, you can come again on a visit on a visa waiver for another 3 months, potentially look at opportunities in the local market while you're on that trip, and see if there are any job openings that do fit your criteria, and engage in conversations, potential conversations with those people that are in the industry while you are in New Zealand. Alternatively, if you are not necessarily qualified, you may looking into further studies, for example, a bachelor degree level qualification, or if you already have one of those, taking the next step further. Um, and yeah, it's just about testing the labor market out there. If you don't necessarily meet the green list requirements or high demand, because as I mentioned, you do still have the opportunity to migrate through the skilled migrant category through a qualification, and then finding a job in New Zealand that will support you towards that pathway. Um, so yeah, that would be some of the options that would potentially be available to you. I mean, it's obviously difficult to pinpoint exactly how we could assist, but this anonymous attendee, you're more than welcome to reach out to us so we can complete a eligibility assessment for you in particular, and anybody else who had similar thoughts or similar questions.
Yeah, that was awesome. Thank you. I will just add, I would probably say maybe only 50% of the visas we're doing at the moment are actually for people who've got job offers in the green list space.
Mm.
So there are, the other 50% are people who have got job offers that are not in the green list. So the green list is largely just there to make certain occupations easier to get visas, because Immigration New Zealand has identified that those occupations are of critical shortage to New Zealand. But there is obviously a whole cohort of people that don't easily fit into that green list criteria, who do still migrate and still obtain residence. So try not to get too caught up in those lists. The next one we've got from Stacey, who's asking about how difficult is it to migrate when you're over 55. Sorry, Stacey, a lot of probably what you've listened to isn't quite relevant to you, but there are some very niche categories that we can actually discuss with you. They're not as general. So if you would just like to reach out via email, you can direct that to me and I will be able to answer that for you, give you some options around what migration over 55 can look like. The next one, Caroline is asking about the catch-22 of getting a job without a visa. Yeah, so this is a question we get all the time. There is definitely a catch-22 where a lot of employers will say we can't hire you till you've got a visa, but then also you can't get the visa till you've got a job. And that's where that portion of our assistance of us being able to liaise with the employer and actually kind of break down that process and make it a whole lot easier is really valuable, because often once we pick up the phone, so if you get an employer who's, says, Caroline, you look great, we'd love to hire you, but we're not sure about this visa process, that's where we can jump in, pick up the phone in New Zealand hours and have a conversation with that employer and actually break it down for them. And that will often 9 times out of 10 get that employer over that barrier of that catch-22 situation, because they'll actually realize it's not as difficult as what they thought it was. Oh, next one. So we've got Christine. This is another very niche one. So what is the pathway to move to New Zealand for people who are self-employed? Neither Fred or I specialize in what's called the entrepreneur visa, but we have got an advisor in-house who does. So again, please do email us and we can connect you with the right person, because that is a very, very specialized niche category. And we've got only one advisor who's well versed in that. So I don't want to answer that question because I will probably get it wrong and I don't want to. In regards to bringing parents, which is the other end of your question, Christine, again, there are certain parent categories, there are investment-based categories, and there are categories which require you to have actually been a resident for 3 years before you can sponsor. So just pop that into your question when you email us and we can give you the information on that one. So we've got another one. For my situation, my wife is a midwife and I have experience in AI and analytics. Given that her occupation is tier 1 of the green list, would that enable me to be eligible to work too on that same visa? I'll give that one to you, Fred.
Yeah, sure. So let's say your wife does meet the requirements for green list for the role of a midwife. So if it was a tier 1 green list job, essentially what that means is you can be included in the same resident visa application as your wife as a partner. And if that application is approved and she meets all the requirements, you can both come into New Zealand as residents, and you will not be, subject to any restrictions in terms of your work opportunities. But if it was any other pathway, let's say your wife was to get an accredited employer work visa in the first instance, you can apply on the basis of partnership, and you can also get a partnership work visa through your wife's accredited employer work visa. So, regardless of the category, you can be included as a partner as long as you've been. So, I understand you're married, and as long as you've been living together for at least 12 months in total, you can be included in residence application, or a little bit less than that for a temporary work visa application.
Oh, perfect. So we've got one here. Any major medical conditions that would not allow you to move to New Zealand? So there are a list of medical conditions which immigration stipulate that you generally won't be eligible for a visa. In that situation, some people are still able to get visas even if their condition is on that list, but we have to go through a process of a medical waiver. Effectively, Immigration New Zealand are looking at how much that medical condition may cost the New Zealand government, and they do put a threshold attached to that. So it's 81,000. It's either 81,000 across the lifetime or 81,000 within 5 years, depending on what that condition is. So we can, that's probably again another one, and best to email us just because we need more information specifically about what, your medical condition is, or, whether it's you or a family member, and then we can give you some clearer guidance. We'll just go over a couple more. Sorry, everyone's popping a whole bunch of questions through now, and we're not going to be able to get to everyone because we've just about used up our hour. Anthony is asking, where can you find the accredited employers list, Fred?
So thankfully, Google is a friend there. So if you type in green list, or sorry, if you type in a list of accredited employers, INZ, so Immigration New Zealand, the first couple of options there should pop up on Google and will lead you directly to the immigration website. I know the immigration website itself is fairly hard to navigate, so just going and on the website itself, you'll probably struggle to find exactly where things are. But if you Google them, you'll get to the right link.
Cool. I will just add to that. So don't get too caught up on just looking for accredited employers on that list. So we are still actually submitting new
Mm,
accreditation applications every week. I mean, I submitted one yesterday, and that was a
yes.
classic example of one of my clients had applied for a job. The employer wasn't accredited. We talked them through the process. The employer engaged us to do the accreditation, and they've now subsequently, gone through that process, and the next step will be the job check. So a lot of employers won't actually become
Mm,
accredited until they have to. So just don't get too caught up on whether or not they already are. Accreditation is relatively straightforward to get for an employer now, so it's not a massive hurdle, and it's not overly expensive either. So just try not to get too caught up in that list either.
yes, I'd agree with that. Thanks, Charlotte.
Gary's got a great question about bringing your pets to New Zealand. We do specialize in humans. We don't specialize in your furry family members, but we do partner with a company called Starwood Pet Travel. They are actually US based, and they're amazing. So we partnered with them after quite a few of our clients had gone through the process of migrating their pets to New Zealand with them. And they give you the whole, they take care of that whole process for you. So they will even give you guidance on where you can take your pets to certain vets to get, so a vet who knows exactly what's required to migrate your cat or dog. So yeah, definitely, again, if you would like to be connected with Starwood Pet Travel, please do reach out and we can make that connection for you as well. We've got a whole bunch of thank yous too, which is nice. Thanks, guys.
Thank you,
Oh,
everyone.
Sean is asking, we need help finding an employer. Can you help with that, Fred? I'll give that one to you.
All right. So, unfortunately, in terms of finding employees specifically, that is something that you must undertake yourself as an individual. So, the reason being, in the first instance, is that if they're looking for a skilled worker such as yourself, they want to hear from you directly because you are the one that's going to be, fitting into the team. You're the one that's going to be talking about your own credentials that you would know best compared to an advisor. But certainly, we do provide, as part of our service package to people, a job search package. So essentially, that will contain reformatted CVs in the New Zealand template that we know New Zealand employees respond well to. We provide cover letters templates as well, and also representation letters stating that you, as a migrant, you're working with an individual that is a licensed immigration advisor based in New Zealand, and the employer can ask us any questions that they may have about the migration or visa process in order to bring you into New Zealand. But unfortunately, the actual process of finding an employer is something you'll have to undertake yourself. But hopefully, some of the documentation that we can provide as part of our service can facilitate or really help you get over the line in terms of finding the employers.
So Carolina is asking, since I already have a master's degree, what other kind of qualification can I get in New Zealand in order to get a post-study job visa? So some people will come and study a second master's, and immigration will happily accept that. You couldn't come and study the same type of master's. So for example, if you already had an MBA and then you said, oh, I'm going to come study another MBA in New Zealand just to get that post-study work visa, it would definitely raise flags for Immigration New Zealand. But if you've studied a master's, a little while ago and you've had perhaps, worked in a different field, or you're interested in working in a different field that master's degree may be relevant to, we can create a case as to why you want to come and study a master's. And that is quite an important part of the student visa process in general. Immigration want to see that it's either a logical progression of your current work experience or qualifications, or you've got a really good reason as to why it may not be a logical progression. And we get lots of people who do come and study qualifications that are because they simply want a career change, but we have to quite clearly map out why you're wanting to do that. So yeah, already having a master's doesn't actually exclude you from that option. But again, touch base and one of our advisors can kind of look at that for you. We can help because we are education agents. We've had training from those education providers to kind of help pick out courses. And then obviously we add the immigration aspect into it as well, where we can then not only choose your courses, but choose courses that are going to mean that a visa will be approved as well. So there is, a little bit of complexity to that student visa portion with course selection, but that's something that any one of our advisors can actually guide you through. So that's no trouble at all for us. Timothy's asking about engineering frequently requires security clearances or background checks. Do you know if residency versus citizenship poses any challenge to this? You actually have to provide police checks for work visas and residency. You don't have to provide them again at citizenship stage, but immigration do require them before they grant you a visa. So if there's anything you're maybe worried about in terms of your that may pop on a criminal record, even if it's a really old charge, again, have a chat to us. But generally, you do need to be relatively criminal record free to migrate. They will obviously make exceptions if, a lot of people have done silly stuff when they were younger and might have the odd charge here and there. But again, that's something we can provide guidance on as to what that may or may not look like for you. And Katie is asking, if you get a master's in a tier 1 green list job in New Zealand on a student visa, what are the odds of getting a job in New Zealand and getting to stay in the country? I'll give that one to you, Fred, if that's okay.
Yeah, sure. So as I mentioned, upon completion of a master level qualification, you'll get what's called a post-study work visa. So as far as the likelihood of you getting a job after completion of studies, it's actually very high, and that's the reason why a lot of people pivot towards this pathway. It's because New Zealand employers, when they're looking to hire people, typically they either want to take on a New Zealand citizen or resident who can work fully in New Zealand, or those people who are already in New Zealand and hold a work visa allowing them to work for the employer. So a post-study work visa doesn't require the employer to hold employer accreditation, do a job check. So it's really a nice visa and an attractive visa for migrants to have in terms of looking for opportunities in New Zealand, because they're not restricted, nor is the employer. And then in terms of I understand that upon studies, if you're moving to a different field, you won't necessarily be um, experience in the industry, but certainly given you've completed has shown your ability to complete a master level qualification on a new topic, typically that's something that employers would be happy to give opportunities for, at least to in the first instance, get you up to speed as far as the work is concerned. So, I mean, that's why the benefit of having a 3-year work visa, say you work for a 6-month period to get yourself up to speed in that particular industry, and then from there move on to the relevant role that you're looking towards that is more commensurate to your master's qualification. Will give you that opportunity given you have a post-study open work visa for another 2 years. So yeah, typically a lot of our clients pivot towards this pathway if they've exhausted their job search opportunities, just because it does provide that that post-study work visa upon completion, which makes you a lot more attractive to New Zealand employers.
Oh, perfect. We're down to 2 guys, so I think we'll just clear them out because then everyone will at least have had a answer to their questions. So Jessica is asking, if we do find we hit a snag in the visa process, how much help will you give us? So as an immigration consultancy, our main function, I guess for lack of a better term, is that we actually take that visa process off your hands. So we provide you with information relating to your documentation instructions. So everything you'll need for an application is included in there. You get one-on-one help with an advisor. So you're allocated to one of our 12 advisors in the team. And then you're able to have unlimited question and answers with them, whether it's by Zoom or email or phone call. So yeah, you can connect with them as little or as much as you like. Once a job offer does come through or you decide to study, we actually we prepare and submit the applications to Immigration New Zealand for you. So if there is a snag in that process, we actually manage that completely for you. I mean, you obviously have to provide us the information, but we actually do the liaising back and forth with Immigration New Zealand to rectify whatever the snag may be, or we try and mitigate it from the outset. So if we see something that we think may cause questions from immigration, we will actually highlight that to begin with, and we highlight that at time of visa submission, because what that often means is that if we highlight it at time of visa submission, immigration will say, yep, great, we've got all the information we need, and it should actually mean that that visa then processes faster, or as fast as it possibly can, rather than waiting for immigration to request information directly from us. So if you're wanting help, we can take that entire immigration process off your hands, and you won't have to deal with liaising with a very sometimes painful government department down here in New Zealand.
Yeah. And it's something I'd just like to quickly add to that
Yeah,
as
of
well,
course.
Charlotte.
Jump in.
Certainly, our recommendation would always be, engage with us from the very beginning, just so that we can take care of that full visa process for you and anticipate any potential snags that you may encounter as part of that process and front foot it and deal with it up front with Immigration New Zealand, rather than having to deal with it at a later stage when it's something that maybe we could have addressed in the first instance. Often we find that a lot of people who choose to undertake their own visa process by themselves in the first instance and do hit a snag, honestly, most of the time it ends up costing them, more time and more resources in terms of trying to get that fix across the line, versus somebody who just chose to engage with us from the beginning, and we were able to front foot any of these potential issues in the first instance. So yeah, just something, not a sales pitch, but typically this is something that we do encounter, honestly speaking. So yeah, please do feel free to at least reach out to us if you have any queries about your migration process.
Yeah, Fred's definitely right. It is often actually more time consuming and therefore more expensive for us to unpick something partway through. So yeah, particularly if you've got a unique situation or you think something might cause an issue, definitely engage with us from the outset, and we can give you honest guidance and feedback about what that might look like for you. Denise is just asking, how much do your services cost? We don't actually charge, we don't have like a set fee that we charge everyone. We do quote on a case-by-case basis. So depending on what the situation looks like for you and your family specifically, and which visas you are eligible for, whether or not you do have any health or criminal health concerns or criminal convictions, will actually form what that quote looks like. Are you coming to us with a job offer first? Are you looking at studying? So yeah, unfortunately, we can't give you a specific number, but again, Denise, if you'd like to reach out, we can definitely give you a quote based on your specific situation. And last question, this will definitely be our last one. So we've got someone asking, I'm an electrician, do you recommend an employee agency or self-targeting companies or electrical outfits that might be looking to hire overseas tradies? recruiters are amazing, and we work a lot with recruiters, and they definitely do have their place. But it is important to remember that a recruiter will only put you forward for roles that they are going to get paid a commission for. So it is good to keep an open mind. We don't recommend that you rely solely on recruiters because, again, it depends on who their clients are in terms of who their employers are that they're working with as to how readily they will put you forward for roles. They won't go out and find a random company and try and place you. So definitely worth having a chat and connecting with a recruiter. But if I couldn't even tell you the number of times that I've had people come back to me and had a recruiter tell my client, oh, you're never going to get a job. And it's just purely because either the recruiter doesn't understand the visa process, or the recruiters, employers they're working for don't have jobs going at the moment, or the employer doesn't understand the visa process. So don't rely on them solely. Definitely keep an open mind. And I would also look at applying to companies directly. Seek.co.nz, SEEK. .co.nz. That's a really wonderful job listing site in New Zealand and is one of the main ones. And then the other one is Trade Me. So Trade Me is a bit like a combination of it's a bit like Craigslist a little bit, where you can just about Craigslist and eBay actually is probably a good way to describe Trade
I'd
Me.
say so.
Yeah, you can find cars, jobs, houses, pets, household goods, everything is on Trade Me. So Trade Me and Seek are definitely the two main job listing sites. So take a look at them. The construction space in particular has been quite quiet for the last 12 months, but we're slowly starting to see it improve. So moving into 2025, if you are a tradie, you'll definitely start seeing more job opportunities pop up. It's not to say we haven't had clients hired in construction, because we have. It's just been a little bit slower this year than it has others. So 2025 is looking much better. Anyway, we'll call it there. Thank you so much to everyone who has attended. This has been recorded as well. So a recording will be sent out to everyone. So if you want to watch it back, please do. Or if you want to share it with any friends or family who may be interested in migrating, you are more than welcome to do so. Otherwise, please do send us an email. We'd love to hear from you. As mentioned, we'll give you a free eligibility assessment, and that includes a free 30-minute consultation with one of our advisors who'll be able to answer any questions you have relating to that immigration process. So everyone, take care. Thank you so much, and we look forward to hearing from you.
Thanks,
Thanks.
everyone.
Bye.
Thank you for your time.